I was teaching deep in the deep South, and I was kind of at a career detour.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cookies and Coffee with Steven. Today, I am joined by an incredible musician, an international conducting career with orchestras around the world, music director and conductor of the San Bernardino Symphony, the Southeast Symphony, artistic director of Musicians at Play, a session conductor with over 100 credits to his name, a leading authority on minority and women composers, a session bassoonist who's prolific on all the woodwind instruments, graduate of Northwestern, Yale, and I believe somewhere in there he also invented the kitchen sink. So please welcome Anthony Parnther. Anthony, thank you for being here.
I think I was on the advisory committee for the kitchen sink, so I can't be credited for its invention. But
oh, okay. What was your introduction to music and led you into being a musician?
My reason for joining band, as they call it, it was kind of nefarious. I was in math class or science class or whatever class that was horrible in middle school, and I would always hear over the intercom what all the members of the Lincoln Middle School band report to the bus for their trip to King's Dominion or Busch Gardens or Six Flags or Disney World. And then, of course, like half the class would get up joyously and excitedly, leave the rest of us behind. And, my parents, I grew up in a really sheltered background, and my parents were really not into the whole, going to theme parks. But I was determined to get myself to a theme park, and band was going to be the way. So what I literally did is I grabbed the dictionary, I opened it to the A section, and, because now I'm starting to really date myself, because at night, I would end up watching the Lawrence Welk show. Lawrence Welk show. I wasn't into the accordion because I used to see the accordion on the Lawrence Welk show all the time. So I turned to the B section and saw a picture of a bassoon, and I was like, oh, yep, this is the one. So I'm going to play the bassoon. So I took the dictionary to the band director, and I said, hi, my name is Anthony Parnther, and I would like to play the bassoon in band next year. And he looked at me like I had like 7 hits and was like, excuse me? And so I joined band. I learned to play the bassoon over the summer, and the next year we did not go on any trips.
Nice. So you perform extensively on the bassoon and on other woodwind instruments. You play all of them, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and you're a highly successful conductor. So did you always, when you finally decided, I want to go into music, did you know that you wanted to play instruments professionally and conduct, or was one more of your focus in the beginning?
Well, when I decided that I wanted to pursue a career in music, if you listen very carefully, you can hear the echoes of my parents' tears cascading down their face, because that was not a popular decision with them. Conducting was always in the back of my mind, but I never thought it was real. It was like a realistic career choice. But I knew that I wanted to be a bassoonist in a major symphony orchestra. That's sort of where I was geared at the moment, and it sort of began there. But when people ask me what I do, I always say that I'm a musician. I don't necessarily say I'm a conductor or a bassoonist or a whatever. I just say I'm a musician. So like all facets of music making, whether it be writing music or teaching it or playing it or conducting it, are all pretty equally important to me.
And in the introduction, I didn't even mention anything about writing music or orchestrating music or anything, but that's something you do as well, correct?
Anything to keep the lights on.
To keep the power going. So when you went into college, did you go in knowing you were majoring in music, or is that something you decided later?
Yeah, I knew that I was majoring in music for sure, yeah.
And in that moment, you knew bassoon was your main focus?
Yes, absolutely.
Hoping the college would go on a trip to a theme park.
Absolutely.
Right. So when did conducting become something more for you beyond just playing the bassoon?
Well, in high school band, we had the opportunity to audition for a drum major. So we were qualified to audition our sophomore year. So, what you had to do is you had to take this week-long clinic with this drum major instructor, and there'd be like 30 of us. We had a pretty big high school band program where I'm from in Virginia, and so I knew that I wanted to conduct the band. I wanted to be that person up there. There's all these people. So I was very interested in that, and conducting was always very fascinating to me. But I auditioned my sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school and did not achieve it. But, going back on it, I was like, my band directors clearly made the right decision, because I had no business being the drum major, quite frankly. But at the time, I was just like, no, my destiny. I am not fulfilling my destiny. So I overcompensated by becoming an orchestra conductor all these years later.
Where did you head for college? What was your first stop?
I went straight to Illinois and started off as a bassoon major at Northwestern. It was a really intense experience. The thing with Northwestern is that the applied faculty, those who teach all of the various, violin through bassoon and so forth, most of them are members of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So I was advised by my high school bassoon teacher that, you wanted to go to one of the schools where one of the 5 major orchestras are, so there's New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Boston. And that's, for the most part, where most of the major conservatories are. And Northwestern happened to give me the most money. So there I went.
While you were there, did you get the opportunity to conduct at all? Is that where you started doing some conducting, or did it come later?
A lot of my conducting came from little ensembles that I began to put together when I was, an upperclassman. And then, after I left Northwestern and I went and pursued a degree in education. I also have a degree in education at a small school in Tennessee. I got a lot of opportunities to conduct there. But in undergrad, I was pretty focused on learning to play the bassoon.
You also have a degree from Yale, correct?
Correct.
And what's that degree?
That's in orchestral conducting.
So what eventually led to your work of playing bassoon in sessions? How did that come about?
It's hard to, everybody's path into the studios is different. And mine came from just being seen and heard in the right places. I'd be seen playing a concert here, and then that composer would invite me to play on one of their sessions. And then, I'd work over here, and then I'd run into another composer or a contractor who liked what they heard, and then brought me into play on a session. Then I used to play in this group called the Golden State Pops Orchestra that you might be familiar with, where we got to interface with many active of composers, and some of them heard me. But the trick is, it's difficult enough to get in the room, but you have to also figure out how to stay in the room.
Right.
So it's been a little over a decade of some really wild opportunities.
Being in LA, networking, playing, and being in the right performance at the right time to meet the right people, and as you're saying, playing well enough that it got their attention to hire you, and then continuing to play well enough for them to keep bringing you back. I think sometimes people, when they're going to school, they're so focused on the technical side of things, the whole aspect of networking or how to get the job isn't always talked a lot about. And I think it's nice when they hear those stories about, in your case, taking all these jobs and exposing yourself to the right people. What brought you to LA to even have that opportunity to be here to expose yourself to these people?
I was teaching deep in the deep South, and I was kind of at a career detour. I had wanted to play the bassoon professionally, but I ended up teaching, which I don't take back for a second. But I knew that I wanted to be involved. I wanted to conduct and play at a higher level than was available where I was living. And I'd saved up enough money to move somewhere. I'd already lived in New York City, and I lived in Chicago. So I knew that I wanted to try to give it a go. So I really kind of moved to Los Angeles on a whim. And I kind of decided if I don't make anything happen in 2 years, then maybe I pursue my doctorate or, do something else. But I kind of came out here to just see if I could make something happen, and thankfully I was able to make some things happen.
A couple of those things you've made happen is the San Bernardino Symphony and the Southeast Symphony. So talk about how you eventually built to being the conductor of two of the most respected orchestras in the area. How did that come to be?
The commonality between both of those orchestras, which is a little unusual, especially for a conductor, is that I started off in both orchestras as a substitute musician. So I remember I was, this must be 12 years ago, I was contracted to come in and play second bassoon with the Southeast Symphony. And it was the first time in my entire career that I walked into the room and I was not the only African-American person in the room. In fact, nearly everybody in the orchestra was African-American. And it was an incredible experience to be surrounded by members of my immediate community in a symphonic setting. And then eventually the music director at that time moved on to other ventures, and they put out a search for a new music director, and I definitely wanted to be considered. So I applied, I auditioned, I interviewed with the board, and I went through all of the processes, and then became the music director. And that was 11 years ago. And it was fairly similar for the San Bernardino Symphony. They put out an international search for a music director, and I understand that there were many applications worldwide, and then there were also some invitations, but I made it into the top 10, the last 10 candidates, and they had 10 candidates from all over the country and a couple from outside of the U.S. And it was a 2-year process. I was the very first conductor of the 10 finalists to go, and it's a really intense, not pretty, it's a very intense situation. You have to go in 3 rehearsals and put together a big program. You have to go and interface with donors. You have to interview for the search committee and the board of directors. And they really know everything about you before you walk in the room, first of all. And you've got to very quickly make a lot happen in a short time with this professional orchestra. And after 2 years, they made me music director. So, and now I'm ending my first season prematurely because of COVID, but it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah, I got to say, even though, your first season's not ending the way that everybody would have hoped, it's from what you were able to do prior to all of this happening, it was pretty impressive, I think. The fact that, how many concerts did you do with them before the COVID-19 started?
I think 4 or 5.
And if I'm not mistaken, besides the fact that these were musically, artistically successful concerts, the sales and the size of the audiences was something that was very impressive for what they traditionally were getting, if I understood correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, they have a large and dedicated crowd base out there, but we were able to sell out almost all of our concerts this season, which was new for that orchestra.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We're really looking forward to expanding on that next season when we hopefully come back.
Thank you for watching. For more great videos, subscribe to the Maestro Fox YouTube channel. To learn more about the Maestro, visit StevenAllenFox.com.